As you know, the topic today is business strategies to attract and retain clients. It's going to be a panel discussion. We have 3 panelists joining us today. And before diving into the topic, just a brief intro about both of us who will be moderating the session. My name is Miryana. I'm part of the customer success team. I've been in the co-working industry for around 8 years right now. I've been working for co-working spaces. I've been a member in co-working spaces, and I'm working on the software side of the co-working world. And this is very briefly about me. Vili?
Hi everyone, my name is Viliyana. I'm also part of the customer success team. I do really hope that you enjoyed the discussion today, and we're going to try to make it as exciting as possible with Miryana and the questions we have prepared today for our panelists.
And before presenting our panelists, we just wanted to give you a heads up that we recently launched a new ebook, which is focused on the ways to reopen a future-proof, flexible space post-COVID-19. We'll send a follow-up email after the panel discussion with a link to it. There are many useful tips in it, and we feel that it's really aligned with the topic we're discussing today. So I think it will be just a great addition to what we'll be covering on the discussion today. So let me start with introducing William. So he is co-founder and director of MyWorkSpot. This space operates for more than 4 years now. Will, if you want, you can just say a couple of words about your space and yourself. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So firstly, thank you for inviting me to talk today. It's a pleasure. So yeah, I'm the co-founder of MyWorkSpot in sunny Maidenhead, just outside London, and we have one space. It's a 12,000 square foot building, yeah. So we've been going for about 4 years now, and yeah, looking forward to speaking to the rest of the panel about the challenges we've faced over the last year.
Thank you, Will. We are continuing with Tim. He's co-founder and general manager of Working. It's a leading co-working provider in the rural area with 9 spaces and more than 500 members. Tim, do you want to briefly say a couple of words?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the discussion with you. We started the company back in 2013, and I founded it together with my wife. So it's a real family business.
Great. All right, good. And our last but not least panelist today is Colleen. She is president and COO of Field Collective, based in the States. Colleen, could you please share a couple of words about your space and your role in it?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Field Collective, we have 2 locations currently in the Minneapolis Twin Cities area. So both are in Minneapolis. We have the historic grain exchange space, as well as a location in Northeast. So we've been around just celebrated our 11th year in business. And we're excited to talk today and contribute to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you. Good. So thank you very much for the intro. I'll start with a couple of words about how we picked the topic and why we think it's important for every flexible workspace operator. So we know that in the past 1 year, it's been very hard for most of the businesses, but the flexible space industry is really in the middle of so many restrictions, rules. The target is changing, the target audience is changing. You need to adapt your marketing strategies, your sales, and so on. So I know that for this past year, even though it was really challenging, for now, I believe most of us and most of the businesses have found their kind of working approach to strive their business throughout the pandemic and keep up with the changing requirements from the government and keeping their communities and their members and attracting new ones as well. Maybe I'll start with the first question, more as an intro question to break the ice. Can you tell us maybe, do you know where you put more efforts right now after a year in the pandemic? Do you put more efforts into the retention of the clients that you already have in your community, or you're now focused more on attracting new ones?
Let's start with Colleen, maybe.
Sure. So we've always put more effort and dollars in retention because customer acquisition cost is so high. Although our retention shifted dramatically, so pre-pandemic, once we had members in our spaces, especially dedicated spaces, our retention was up in the 90th percentile, and that shifted pretty dramatically overnight. We didn't have an initial drop off, but as leases came up or agreements came up, we saw that where we saw a very high renewal rate prior to the pandemic, it dropped off pretty significantly. And a lot of that, I think, was just the unknown and not having commitment when there was so much in front of us that we didn't know the answer to. So we did continue to focus on customer retention, but then it was also trying to understand how the market was shifting and how to remarket, I guess, our business. I mean, really overnight, we went from one customer segment to everybody working from home. And so our customer segment kind of, widened dramatically overnight. And so then it was, okay, how do we shift our efforts? So I would say it was almost 50-50, just because, we had to be understanding of customers. And of course, it's important for us to retain them, but it was a unique relationship from a retention standpoint, and then kind of shifting time and resources over to the attraction side. So, and we still kind of tried to maintain that balance throughout.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so from our perspective here in the UK, I think exactly the same really as Colleen is saying there. Retention was probably the sort of main focus back in the good old days, I suppose, when we had a space that was full and sort of raring to go, and we'd done the work to kind of make sure the space was up to capacity. But yeah, unfortunately for us in our scenario, all of our sort of licenses started to come to an end just as the pandemic decided to hit in and the lockdown kicked in. So obviously a lot of conversations then had to happen about what was next. So yeah, our main focus really now is attraction again, whilst still keeping an eye on that retention side of things, because it's always important. You can't take your eye off that ball, because those people that are in the space are highly important. And actually the really nice thing that we're seeing now is that the people we're attracting are actually still the same people that just didn't renew at the time. It's just because their situation changed. They thought their businesses were going to fall off a cliff in terms of what they were going to see. So it's nice that they're coming back. But then also, again, to Colleen's words, the world has opened up now. There's a whole shift, which I'm sure we'll cover as we go through. But yeah, there's a lot more opportunity there now.
Yeah. Very similar experience we had. For us, the situation was a bit difficult because just before the pandemic, we just doubled in size. So we opened 4 new locations in October 2019, November 2019, December, and then January. So 1 location for every month. And we had a very good February. And then March, of course, in Germany, the pandemic hit and we had the lockdown. So that was stressful. I was worried a lot about retention, and that was the main focus, of course, and it worked exceptionally well. So we still have many members on who were with us before the pandemic, but of course we need to fill the new spaces, and so that's also important. And I think the market is going all right at the moment. So companies are moving in, there's some activity. But first and foremost, the last year was about customer retention, definitely.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks everyone for the answers. I just want to go back to what Colleen said initially about the shift in the market. So did you guys do a market analysis or reevaluated your marketing strategy? And actually, at what point you decide to do this? Because, you know, actually the pandemic circumstances were very, very unexpected for us all. Maybe in the beginning we thought that it's going to take much shorter time than it's taking. So at what stage did you actually do such a market analysis and reevaluation of the marketing strategy? Let's start with you maybe this time.
Yeah, sure. So for us, it's a bit of a strange one because actually we started this this journey in the co-working world thinking that actually those people that are working from home will come and use us. And this was sort of 4 years ago. And we thought, you know what, if we get a space that's close to a train station, those commuters that naturally commute into London won't necessarily commute all the time, and we can attract them a little bit back. But actually, we found completely different. We found that it was actually an entrepreneurial type of businesses that were coming to use us, along with small businesses in the area. And that's how we so our mindset had to shift when we first started, actually. The pandemic has completely flipped that on its head. And actually what we thought was going to happen back then is now happening in that, you know, obviously everyone now has to work from home. How this is going to settle is still to be decided. I think we're not quite seeing how the land will lie in terms of people going back to work or whether they'll continue to work from home. There's definitely a shift in terms of we're hearing people's employment contracts being changed, so they have additional flexible working contracts in there, and or additional clauses for flexible working. So there's a recognition of that. But actually, yeah, so in terms of a marketing strategy, the shift has definitely tried to go towards actually a corporate kind of audience that we didn't necessarily have before, but now are starting to see. And actually, the really interesting thing from our point of view is, and how this land will lie, is those corporate employees at the moment are paying for themselves to come to these sort of spaces. So rather than that commute cost that they currently spend, or they would be spending if they were going to where they work, they're using that cost to actually pay for space that they have here. Going forward, how that settles will be really interesting. Whether that then falls onto the employer or who does you know cover that cost. That's what we're looking to see. But in terms of marketing, yeah, we've certainly started to try and shift and get that message out more to a corporate audience, and those people that we know work in London but live in our area that are local to us.
Yeah, I see. How about you, Tim?
Yeah, we really ran the numbers, so to speak, just a few weeks ago, and trying to make up our mind what this all means now. And I think it's a great opportunity for the co-working business. There is some research out from Pricewaterhouse and people like that. And also, of course, you can talk to your members, see whether they are paying for themselves or whether the employer pays. I think we have a 50-50 ratio at the moment. And I think this is, it really opens up the window from a very niche focused business now to basically everybody who is working with a computer, more or less. So I think we saw that trend already, right? And that was one trend I think many market participants were counting on, that work will become more distributed. We have cloud computing, everything. And now we say the companies, they really had this boot camp, so to speak, in learning how to work remotely. And we won't go back to normal. And I think maybe working 5 days a week from home, I think for 90% of the people, that's a nightmare. But also maybe being forced to go to the office 5 days a week also is not the spot. And in between, there's co-working. I think it's a great market opportunity. And I think, yes, 2020 was difficult and not so easy to go through, but I think in the next few months, we will benefit from that, all of us.
That was actually a great saying. I can even put a quote, like in between is the co-working.
you can do that. I'm also happy to share some of the research we've done. So I sent you over the files. You can share that. That's we have some sources, and I think it's very interesting to compare the desk research with talking to your members and seeing what clients come in. We have many more clients who are employees. That change is definitely there already. Also, on a small note, we now have many students because the libraries and the universities are closed. I don't think that's maybe a big part of what co-working should be, but we probably signed up 10 students during the last weeks alone. So
yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Tim. Colleen, what about you? Let's hear you. Let's hear you as well.
Yeah, we shifted, like, I would say every couple of months. You know, at the start of it, you know, nobody knew how long it was going to last. There was a lot of uncertainty, and so we stuck to our core tenet. But then, you know, in reference to the last question and talking about how the market kind of opened up overnight, as that time frame seemed to extend and everybody realized we were kind of in this for the long haul and they needed to start thinking about what is their strategy as an individual, as a company. We started shifting, you know, and we, like Will, we started targeting larger companies that were maybe realizing they had too much square footage or right sizing or trying to preserve company culture and figuring out what's the right dynamic of allowing flexibility while also maintaining that culture, which is really hard to do over digital platforms solely. And so, you know, we've tried a couple of different things. Call it, you know, firing bullets in a couple of different areas. We even talked locally to residential apartment complexes and condos where their residents might want to get out of their home and trying to market that way. So we've tried a couple of different things, and I think it's shifted over time, and we're just kind of seeing where that appetite is. But in that, you know, overnight shift to opening up the market, with that comes an education, because there's a ton of opportunity, and a lot of people, even though we all know it near and dear, don't even know co-working is an option. So, you know, a lot of it was about education and just, you know, trying to move to different markets, different customer segments to say, hey, here's another option. And doing that either through titles and doing some searches that way for people like who might be in operations or a VP that's thinking about what is their future workplace strategy. So it's definitely migrated over time. And I think it will continue to do so. And as people's leases come up, or as, you know, they start to get people who are exhausted of working from home full time, or that continues to present challenges, we'll keep adapting our messaging as that unfolds.
Yeah, so just to summarize it, you have reevaluated the situation, you have changed your strategies. Could you please give us an example of what marketing campaigns are you currently launching? For example, have you started something different since the pandemic? Are you, for example, using multi-channel marketing or outbound marketing campaigns? Like, what's new? What's new?
Yeah, we've tried a couple of different things. We've launched, you know, lead generators and creating some tools like functional work plans or different types of documents that could be resources for those types of people who are maybe reimagining their workplace strategy and thinking about, you know, their third place, including a co-working space like ours, rather than just, you know, a home or their corporate headquarters, for example. We've also kind of launched nurturing strategies. So we had quite a few people within our CRM. And so kind of relaunching some of that education and around, you know, that this is a safe place to go, and, you know, all of the different fears and things, addressing all of the things that we've heard throughout the last year, and launching some nurturing campaigns around that, as well as education. So we've also explored, you know, billboard signage, you know, in yard signs. We've talked about radio ads. So we're trying to really look from a diverse perspective, just back to that education and that blue ocean opportunity to try to just broaden where we had maybe just done organic and paid social prior. We're trying to broaden that into other markets so that we can get some more exposure and also offer tools to people who might be struggling through some of these transitions and figuring out what the future could look like.
Great.
Yeah, I think we've done very similar. So so we actually started trying to do an outbound campaign about sort of probably 4 months ago, and we thought, well, let's have a go at. It's not something we tried before, so we thought, well, let's have a go, and we sort of acquired some data to try and do that. And then obviously the quick realization was that all those numbers that we're calling are people's offices that they're not in at the moment. so that quickly stopped. But yeah, no, I think the other piece, and back to Colleen's point about educating people on co-working, what we've tried to do is things like blogs, and mix and match that with our social media strategy. So writing blogs about educating that co-working is an option to these people, and sending that out to the local area as well. Also things like making sure that our members that are currently here know that there's an opportunity here for their friends, that they've probably got a load of friends that they live very close by to that used to be corporate work, or are corporate workers still, sorry, that no longer commute in, and they might need this option as an alternative. So making sure that they're talking to those people and you know, in some cases incentivizing them. I think we're quite fortunate that we've got a really nice community base here, and member base, and I'm sure everyone else does as well, that they'll actually do that for you anyway. You don't need to really incentivize them, but yeah, so a few different things that we've tried as we go through this, really.
So we tried an outbound campaign as well. The first time we really did that, and that didn't work out at all. I think it's not so easy, and also I think you have to catch the people at the right moment, especially if you target companies when they think about real estate and property. If they have a 2-year lease, it's nice to talk to them, that they won't be interested. So that didn't work out, but we had another initiative by the end of the year, and that was just a basic a referral program. And we the first time in our company's history, we really sent out Christmas cards with a voucher for a friend for a month of co-working. Right? So here you can give this. We know you're hardworking, you're a valued member of the community, and you certainly know other hardworking people. Here's a voucher. They probably can use it at the moment. That worked out fantastically. First of all, everybody was happy because they were able to. They received a gift worth a few, I think, 119 euros. That's our basic flat rate. So there's really value in it. And also they could give that to a friend, and we send that out to our community, but also to business partners, providers, whatever. I think we sent out around about 800 cards, personally signed from the responsible community manager or by my wife and me. So that worked out fantastically. Apart from that, we are working on our SEO at the moment, just because we didn't really pay too much attention to that in the past. So doing some homework, so to speak, and moving forward, it will all be about content marketing and PR, and how to get the message out. I think that's the theme for the coming weeks. Yeah.
That's very interesting, actually. Well, while we were preparing the questions with Miryana, we were brainstorming about newsletters, blogs, and I just heard Will actually mentioning blog posts. And I actually wanted to ask, what do you think about building brand loyalty? Do you think that it leads to long-term retention? What are your thoughts on that? Maybe we can start with Colleen, because before that we again started. So she's been silent for some time now.
Sure. Yeah, I think this goes back to Will's point earlier about that he saw members come back. They might have left initially because of the uncertainty, but they came back. And I think that speaks directly to brand loyalty. We definitely, obviously our preference would be retention all the time, but you do see people kind of cycle through and they do have brand loyalty, and that does help from a retention standpoint. It helps from a referral standpoint for Tim's perspective. There's definitely allowing those people to kind of go out and empower them within the community. And speaking about your brand, one of the other things that we've really tried to do is encourage them to do Google My Business reviews, because in touching back on the marketing piece of it and SEO, one of the things that helps you get ranked and get noticed is regular updates to Google My Business, and that's free, which is great, from a marketing and an ad spend standpoint. But that helps, get reviews, that helps them sell your space. It updates with photos. So that's been a strategy that we've done. And when people have to write reviews, I think it helps cement why they're there in their own minds as well. So I think there's a couple of benefits to that. But yeah, I think, we spend so much time around creating our brand, who we are, why you should come work here or be part of our community. So building that brand loyalty is definitely essential to retention and attraction.
Yeah, maybe I would like to just add a point. I think in terms of brand loyalty, of course, there's the loyalty from the coworker to the co-working operator, but I think a big part of it is also loyalty to the community and to the people who are there. So maybe you know that you won't use the space for the next 8 weeks due to the pandemic, but you still have the connection online with the co-workers, and you're probably looking forward to really coming back. It's not just the brand, it's also the person next to you, so to speak. And if you have a good community, you probably won't quit to save $100.
Yeah, but I think that to that point, that they see that person next to them as part of that brand, right? So that they are kind of your brand being part of your space. So exactly that. We saw exactly the same. Actually, we at the start of the pandemic, we started doing catch-up calls, just literally so that people could jump on and say hello to each other. They're all sat at home alone, and we were like, what can we do to try and connect this community still? And setting up virtual calls that meant they could say hello to each other. It was a little bit chaotic, I'm not going to lie, to start with, but you've got to have someone that mediates it a little bit. But yeah, no, I think that was a really good way of just connecting them and getting to see familiar faces again. Yeah, and other things we did were things like a haircutting tutorial, as we were, just everyone was needing that at the start of lockdown. So yeah, it was just small things like that kind of helped keep our customers engaged, but also build that, I think, that brand loyalty that came with it. I mean, we're quite fortunate. We're one space at the minute, so brand loyalty in one space in an area that doesn't have another co-working space really. It sort of lends to itself. It's quite easy, but yeah, once we start building out, hopefully that's where it becomes quite popular.
Well, the haircut workshop was definitely something very creative that you came up with.
Well, I definitely need it. That's the thing. I'm desperate for it to open up again.
Good. Yeah, talking about marketing strategy, of course, we will shift a bit towards the sales approaches because they're interconnected. And we are also talking about the target audience that you had and the shift in the audience that you made. So I was wondering, did you observe any changes in the client's needs and demands? Maybe for the clients that you have managed to retain, but also in the process of attracting new clients, perhaps, as you said, you shifted more towards the corporate world. So I assume that their actually demands were way different from a regular co-working, let's say. So did you observe such changes, and did you try to adjust to them, and how? Maybe Tim, we can start with you.
I think you have to distinguish a bit between service lines. So for co-working, we already discussed, so classical co-working in the open space, we already discussed that we see much more employees compared to before the pandemic. When we talk about separate offices, I think, of course, we have companies downsizing. So discussions maybe are a bit different with companies who are sizing down than companies who want flexible space because they expect so much growth. I think what we can say at the moment is that companies really value flexibility now. Beforehand, yes, it was probably nice to have, and for some companies it was also important, but now I think every company learned how fast the world could change and how good it is to have a contract that you could adjust within a few weeks or months and not being bound in a long lease for years. I think that argument, it's obvious now. It was theoretical a few months ago.
Yeah, exactly that. I think that's exactly what we found is, pre-pandemic this time round, the first time round, sorry, 12 months, a 12-month license was flexible. Now I think they're expecting even more flexibility than that, and it's interesting. So you kind of have to adapt to the scenario really, and that's what we're having to do. But yeah, I think flexibility is really the key word there. We've had to develop a whole load of different products that try to cater for these markets. So things like part-time offices is an option that we now offer. So there's a whole different way that I think the co-working world has branded this, but there's the timeshare offices, there's part-time offices, there's a whole load of different ways you market it, but ultimately an office that someone can come and use it for a day, because thinking of that corporate team want to meet and work together for one day. So allowing that opportunity to do that is one thing. We also have tried to develop a bit of a product that allows regular bookings of a certain day a week, and almost kind of gives them that specific space for that week. Obviously they can't brand it, they can't do anything they want with that space, but it means that they know they've guaranteed that space once a week. So just almost kind of changing product types and adding a bit more flexibility into it is kind of how we've had to adapt.
Yeah, very similar for us. We also added part-time offices. I think for us, the biggest thing, back to the education piece is, the shift in having some corporate clientele is the front end is a little bit more work. So there's a little more hand-holding because they're not familiar with maybe what the value proposition is, because their price per square foot is more expensive. But, you have your utilities, you have your coffee, you have, your securities handled. And so kind of really showing them what the value proposition is. And then also helping them and hand-holding them through, like, how do I get VPN set up? How do I, set up my suite and some custom design pieces so that they can make it feel like it's their own space. So that's where we've seen the biggest shift in how the customer demand and how we interact with them is more on the education on the front end. Once they kind of get ingrained in the community, and we get through that first process, we see them adapt really quickly, and then their employees, if it's a corporate business that's leased the office or space from us, then you see the employees kind of perk up right away, because they now they're plugged into this community and have a much broader, they're not going to 15,000 empty square feet. They have maybe smaller square footage for their office, but they have this whole other world of possibilities and social and connections and networks. So I think the value proposition shows itself very quickly, but it's being willing and able to maybe invest a little more time on the sales and front end of a contract or a lease for us.
And for the already existing members that you had, did they come up to you, because probably you have a closer relationship with them, you know them, did they come to you with some specific, requirements linked to COVID maybe, but to, divide space in small one-room meeting rooms or one-person meeting rooms, or kind of put walls within the open spaces, something like that? Was it something coming from the client? Did you get all this feedback? Did you try to do something? Or was it a process of communication with the community and kind of common decision on how to proceed? Will?
Yeah, sure. I think I'm trying to think back to when we started all that, really. The government from the UK standpoint actually gave some quite good guidelines as to how offices should operate. So we quickly implemented those to try and make sure that people coming into the space felt safe, let alone that's the first key point, I think, to anyone coming into the space. They need to make sure that they feel that this is a space that they are comfortable within when they come into. So things like our meeting rooms went from 8-person meeting rooms down to 4-person meeting rooms. So, and things like that, and just spreading out people within the space is kind of what we've had to do. In terms of private office space, we've kind of left it up to the tenant or the member themselves to go and figure out what they'd like to do with that space, and how they'd like it. Some have decided that they're happy with it as it is, and they'll alternate who comes in the office, when and how. So it's keeping the conversation going with your members, really, I think, is the key there, and just making sure that they know you're open to talk about it, and have that discussion. And that's kind of what the sort of stance we've taken with it.
Yes, very similar to our approach and experience. So we really take care of all the open areas where people can meet. And of course, there are guidelines, and then there are also best practices. And it's, of course, very important to have an open communication, because, I mean, guidelines are guidelines, but at the end, it must be implemented by the people who work from the space, who use the space. That works quite well, I must say. I'm very happy with that. And of course, we also try to think a bit about the future and not release everything at once. So during 2020, we said, okay, how bad could it be? What can we do? What would be an extreme measure? What is a very sensible measure we could implement now? And then be prepared for the next steps, and also interpret the guidelines from the government for our clients, and then communicate how we interpret that, and providing useful links and stuff like that. And also, yes, in a separate office, the employer is responsible how they implement it. And I think it's basically all over the place. I mean, from startups act very differently than big companies. And yes, we try to encourage safety, of course. It works well. Of course, with 500 members, sometimes we have to have a talk, but I think by and large, it all worked out. Everybody's really sensible, so we don't have really big issues there. But you have to show that you care and invest in the infrastructure, which we have done.
Yeah, it's the same for us. You know, the government provided guidance as far as what was required, and we followed that. One of the things that we also did was we used that as a tool, because it is kind of overwhelming for offices that, even if they wanted to consider reopening, having to create their plan and implement all these procedures, and it costs money. So we offered up our COVID plan to our members to say, hey, if you want to use this for your company, or you want to adapt it, and tried to provide that as a resource. And then from a sales standpoint, using that as a tool to say, hey, this is all the things that you have to do and think about if you want to go back to your office. You know, use us in the meantime, even if it's just a day office or a retreat, until you are ready to address those things. Because there are a lot of components to it. So, you know, thinking through not just removing furniture, but your cleaning protocols and your mask protocols and check-ins. And so it can be timely and costly. So trying to leverage it, I guess, for good on the other side of it has been helpful for us as well.
It's again kind of on the educational level and sharing this kind of knowledge with the community, which is great. And now I would like to to kind of shift back to the flexibility word and the idea to offer more flexible plans. You mentioned that you introduced this kind of part-time offices, but I was wondering, did you introduce other new plans that came up as a service throughout the pandemic, or you're planning to start now? And also, did you start offering more flexible cancellation policies, for instance? And do you think this is influencing on the retention rate as well? If you have more flexible termination rates, do you think that this would actually influence maybe in a bad way the retention? Maybe you have more turnover, but the retention rate maybe will be low. So I just put a couple of questions in one, but yeah.
Well, to make it even more complicated, I'm just going to add one question from the Q&A section, because it's very much related to the memberships, the new memberships that Miryana is talking about. So the question actually asks whether you have offered a work from home membership, and how it looked like. So maybe if you can maybe mention if there are such membership that you have introduced in the other memberships that you have also. This is all of the questions for now.
Yeah.
Where would you like to start? Do you want me to go? We've already kind of shared the memberships that we've kind of created in terms of the part-time offices, but in terms of a virtual or working from home membership, yes, we offered a what we call an access membership. So a very cheap option basically for people that are working from home. It's £10 a month, and what it allows those people is to get access to our community, basically and virtually, so through the OfficeRnD platform, through our Facebook community pages, those kind of things socially that we kind of do, and then just kind of stay in touch with the community that way. And then those people can also jump on those kind of catch-up calls that I mentioned as well, that kind of thing. Then those people can also then, when they feel like they're comfortable or might need the space, they can actually book what they need when they come in. So it's just a case of using the portal itself to actually go and, right, okay, I'm going to book an hour here or there, and I can get away from the four walls that are driving me insane at the moment. So that's one option there. I'm trying to think if there's any other options that we've come up with. I don't think so off the top of my head for now. But yeah, how about you guys, Colleen and Tim? Did you guys come up with some sort of virtual plans as well, or?
Colleen?
We introduced a membership called Work From Home, but it was actually more of a traditional co-working, but it was in between kind of middle of the month, but offering kind of some more flexibility with half days and trying to meet some folks in the middle with where their situation was at. I think one of the challenges we faced with having a work from home membership like Will's, although we are introducing it shortly, is creating enough content to make sure that there was enough value there, even at a low price point. And I think there was content saturation as well as like online, Zoom fatigue and things. So we took a break from that for a little bit of time. They could still come in, have access to the community, but we're starting to get back into that, and having a network of other co-working spaces that are offering up their content and trying to help each other out from that standpoint, because it is a heavy lift to create all of that content consistently have engagement with it. So we did also add the part-time office, day desk rental, but it's kind of ebbed and flowed. And really for us at the end of the day, those transactional sales are so low and a one-off, and it have gone in waves that we've kind of shifted back to what we were pre-pandemic a little bit more, and focusing more on filling dedicated spaces, still having that offering, but just not putting as much resource towards it.
Yeah, we didn't make any major changes to our product portfolio. We took some time to finally introduce the traditional virtual office offering, which we kind of did before, but not really. So now we put in the resources and the brain to really come out with a consistent offer, because that is a bit more independent from the ebbs and flows of the COVID situation. So we introduced that, but we should have done that anyhow. That's basically unrelated, but I think COVID makes it a bit more attractive to have something that isn't really connected to using the space. Apart from that, we stayed with our product portfolio.
Okay, so you didn't really change the cancellation terms of memberships or for office rent or something like that. So the flexibility wasn't focused on the termination, but more on the offering itself, right?
I forgot about that question. So yeah, thank you for the reminder. It's a kind of double-edged sword with the cancellation policy side of things, because I think it attracts the wrong kind of member as well if you give too much in terms of the cancellation side of things, or the flexibility with it. So we've kind of stuck to our guns with our cancellation policy. It was quite flexible anyway, but I think you've got to realize who you might be attracting at that point as well, and those people that just literally want to come in for a month, and you kind of end up putting a load of resource into trying to attract that person in, and then realize that they can't, that they're only going to stay for a month, and it's like, okay, right, there's not really much there. So whilst it's obviously at the moment it's great to have them, so you've got to kind of try and balance the act a little bit there.
We, same on our side, we didn't change our policy. I will say one thing that we did do is prior to the pandemic, we would encourage 12 or 18 month and offer incentive for longer term leases. And we found that people really didn't have the appetite for anything past 6 months. So we just kind of started there rather than going and then just said, you know, if you want to talk about something longer, we can do that. But just trying to be more attentive to where people's propensity was for a time commitment and not trying to extend beyond that. But we left our cancellation policies the same.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, what we did in terms of cancellation policies during the pandemic, so in March, 1 year ago, when the situation was really challenging for everybody, what we said to our co-workers who were using the open space, we said, all right, if you feel uncomfortable using the space, if you don't want to come in, you can quit now without any notice. So it doesn't matter how long your contract runs, you can quit now. And I think that was a very important step. And we only got 3 cancellations, right? So 3 people, not 3%, but 3 people took that opportunity. Everybody else stayed on board. And we also said, okay, if you're experiencing issues, financial issues, if you're, for example, we have an event manager, that guy couldn't work. So of course we need to discuss, come to us and we will work something out. And that worked exceptionally well as well. Yeah, so I think that was a bold move in March, but I think the community saw that we care, right? And that we do not intend on, well, you have 4 more weeks you need to pay. And I mean, that's not really the right approach there. And that worked out.
Good, and this question leads me to the next one, which is linked to the discounts, because it was also a big kind of a topic and question within this whole year. Should you offer discounts or not? For how long? Is this a working strategy? Do you think it maybe works for attraction, but is it really sustainable? Would this lead to retention really? Or this is kind of a one-off sale, as Colleen mentioned? So I don't know, did you take this path or you kind of resisted on the discount concept?
We didn't broadly offer or advertise any discounts. We did do a couple of promotions where we would do like a suite of the month or something, where we would offer an upfront discount for, you know, some sort of commitment. But I would say there were discounts, but it was more on an individual conversation. What were their needs? What were, you know, where was their budget at? What was their business? You know, to Tim's point, personalizing it, humanizing it a little bit, and then working with them and our existing inventory to come up with an agreement that benefited both parties. So we tried a couple of promotions from an outbound standpoint, but really it didn't do much for us to generate additional business. So we found individual conversations were more fruitful for us.
Yeah, very similar approach. We didn't offer bulk discounts for everybody, but we communicated, as I said, if you're experiencing issues, come talk to us. And then for the co-workers, we had a standard plan so that we don't have to have every discussion. So there was, we basically said, if you extend the contract for 3 more months, we will go down 30% for the 3 months. And so it's basically 1 month free. Some people took that opportunity, most didn't. Most just stayed with their plan. And yes, for the offices, it's a special situation. And yeah, we also made the experience. Yes, some people had problems. We tried to work out deals. It worked out well in the end, largely also because the market opened up. So we knew a company wanted to reduce the space. And usually we were able to find a new tenant that moves into the space. So everybody was happy. That was good. And yeah, so we had some companies who tried to take advantage of the situation, saying, okay, we want to reduce because of the situation. So no, we don't have any problems. Our business is going fine. And we didn't enter into to that discussion, I mean, you can really fend that off, because of course we also talked to our landlords and they weren't very willing to go down with the lease either, which we also communicated to the community. Right? We really told them, okay, guys, we have to pay our rent. We won't get any discounts, and that's it.
Yeah, we went down a very similar route. You know, yes, exactly the same. Our landlords weren't kind of budging too much, so it was making sure that the community were aware of that when we were having conversations with them. Obviously there were sort of outliers, so people that were really struggling, and we were happy to talk to them and see what we could do for them, and in some cases we did. But you know, yeah, it certainly wasn't an advertised technique that we would be putting forward. In terms of discounts, in terms of an offer going out there or anything going forward to try and attract people, we haven't actually gone down that road, especially now, because I think the market's there now. Like as we said earlier, the world's opened up to us, so we should eventually, and we've got a great pipeline that I think, going back to kind of our attraction side of things, and one of the challenges we've got with an attraction side is actually just converting those people now and actually getting them to commit to something, because they don't know exactly when we're gonna come out of this really yet. Even though from a UK standpoint we've got a vaccine, we've got a plan to exit, it still isn't concrete as to when that's going to happen. So no, we don't actively offer discounts. If it comes to it, we talk to people about it, and we'll see whether there's a point that works. But again, it's going back to that double-edged sword with the termination clause. Too much of a discount also means that they're not valuing your product. So why do they want to be here in the first place, I think is the question there. So we've got to try and make sure that they're happy with the product, and there's no point in selling it at a cheap price and then both of us being unhappy that we're not getting what we need from the product, from the space, but also that this person is just doing it because it's a low price. So
okay, so we're
already, actually, we had prepared a third section for you, but as we're having a really great discussion and we are already ahead of time, we're just gonna wrap it up with one last question, and then we're gonna ask you several questions from the Q&A channel, because I can see that attendees really want to hear from you and have prepared some questions. So the question is very much related to the events. You know, events are something that's currently practically impossible in most of the parts of the world. So at times when the offline events are very hard to organize, what did you do to keep the community engaged? For example, even the virtual events that you're currently organizing, are they publicly available? Are they closed? Are you using some tools for the virtual events? I can see here that there's one question for the Zoom rooms. And is this a place where people can present Zoom programs and maybe communicate through presentations? So what are the tools in connection to the events that you're currently using, or software solutions that are helping you go through this pandemic circumstances?
I mean, we offer video rooms also in OfficeRnD. Of course, I don't know how many of you use it. If you don't, maybe ping us, we can guide you. But still, if you're using any other software or any kind of other approach to stay in touch with the community,
So we did some virtual happy hours. It sounds like Will did similar things. We did a lot of things kind of early on, tested a couple of different softwares, especially when people were hungry to see their friends, and the whole Zoom and video technology was still kind of new and novel, I guess, a little bit. But as I referred to earlier, we kind of trailed off on that as interest kind of died down and people were sick of being on their computers all day. So we've just started to ramp back up into that as far as events in our space. We offered some things up, but when we had little engagement, we just decided to direct our resources elsewhere. And now we've tried to, in a safe capacity, bring some social type events back into our spaces, where we've allowed for, rather than a happy hour, maybe it's a 3-hour event where they can stop in and get a treat for their dog, or they can connect with a coworker, or they can take a picture in a photo booth, and they can interact, but they can do it on their terms and in a safe way. We haven't really seen much meeting activity, so we're just kind of trying to move with the nature of the community and where their comfort level is and where their engagement is, which has just been kind of a moving target. And now Clubhouse, I know, is the newest thing, and everybody's trying that out. So I just feel like there's such saturation with it that you just kind of have to pick and choose and then really listen to your community and make some decisions around where you want to spend your time and resources.
Yeah, so we haven't started with the offline events. So I think that will take a few more, maybe weeks, maybe months, I don't know. I think we are there's still some way to go, at least here in Germany. But of course, yes, we did a lot of events at the beginning of the pandemic. Then yes, there was Zoom fatigue. Nobody wanted that. Besides, in summer, the weather was good. So we had some outdoor meetings, barbecue, stuff like that, when everything was a bit more relaxed and the weather was fine. And by the end of the year, we started running more online events again. Then, of course, the community get-together breakfast is usually something that goes well, or some coffee together online. That's nice. And now we really have the program more or less like we had it offline before. So we have yoga classes once a week. We have a health expert who is covering some health specific topic. I think now it's a good time because people want the connection, and also I think during winter it's a good thing to do this stuff online. I can't talk too much about the technique because it's not my desk. Fortunately, we have a very good community manager who's organizing all that. One thing I want to add is just, I think it's funny, one of our co-workers who is very tech savvy, he did a computer game that is our co-working space. So you can really move your figure around the floor, and then when you meet somebody, it opens a Jitsi window and you can chat, and you go in meeting rooms and have a meeting session there. You can integrate websites. So we are really looking into that to have it as an option. I will send the link later on. You can share it. It's great. It's just a bit more fun and interactive. We'll see if we can make it so stable that we can use it for the whole community. So far, we just tested it with up to 30 people. But that was quite interesting also because it came from a member. And he built the floor plan. It was really the floor plan of our co-working space. So that was awesome.
That's cool. I like that. I've seen a few things like that. The software that's coming out similar to that is almost kind of trying to mimic that work style of going, I'm at my desk, so don't talk to me type thing. But then when you want to have that sort of water cooler moment where you go and talk to your colleague, you can go and move to the water cooler, and then whoever's there, you can jump online to talk to, which is very clever. It's really, really good. But hopefully we get back to the normality of actually being able to do it in real life as well. So that'd be nice. In terms of events from our perspective, we've so all the catch-up stuff, as Colleen mentioned and I mentioned earlier, that's kind of again has tailed off. I've got to be honest, because everyone's getting that Zoom fatigue. The important thing from now is trying to run events that are really meaningful to our customers. So trying to find those topics that will really engage them. We actually partner with a local chamber of commerce here that run events themselves. So actually working with them to create these events that might work, and actually that gets a wider community and a wider business community from this area as well, which with our name on it also is a good piece in terms of marketing and advertising ourselves a little bit to them as well. So that's the kind of the roads we're going down. We've got plans for or trying to make plans for physical events again. I know I've got a community of people that are desperate to have one of our social events again at some stage, but it's just the world needs to open up again, or more specifically the pubs need to open up again, and that's that will happen. So we're waiting for that day.
Okay, thanks. So let's kind of one last kind of more broad question, and I think this will be to wrap up the session. But how do you have a specific way that you reached out to bigger companies? Do you think that the COVID pandemic influenced the whole negotiation phase with the bigger companies? There was another question from an attendee about some tips and tricks for a space operator that is about to open in June. So I believe the experience you share about the negotiation phase and how you reached out to the companies would help the attendee to actually find ways to reach out to potential clients as well.
Yeah, so we, this kind of circles back around to like our marketing strategy and trying different things and outbound. But we have found the most fruitful, I guess, avenue for connecting, educating, and business development has been using LinkedIn and using like Sales Navigator it's relatively inexpensive. And then looking for people of, within a certain geographic area, depending on where your space is, titles, those types of things where you can engage with them. It's a more personal approach rather than, filling their feeds with ads. Our response rate is much higher and that avenue from an outbound sales and lead generation approach than any other method that we've used through the pandemic. And then we utilize some of the tools that we created that we talked about earlier from a nurturing standpoint. Once we have them engaged and they respond to us, and we might put them in a nurturing funnel where we then educate them over, a series of months to keep it in their back of their mind. Because I think Tim mentioned earlier, you have to engage them at the right point in time. It's either when they're researching, when their lease is up, reaching out, making contact, and then having some sort of plan to enter them into a nurturing campaign so that you can kind of just stay in their mirror, and when they're ready to engage, that your space is the first one they go and look at, has been our most effective strategy. So it's time consuming, but it is definitely, we have the highest response rate. I think on average, we get a 30% response rate on reaching out through Sales Navigator, which is much higher than any other lead source for us.
Yeah, I second that with LinkedIn. Definitely, that's I know our sales teams have found that probably the most fruitful channel for actually getting to speak to the people direct, but also narrowing down on the area that you wanted to speak to. So yeah, definitely, I think that coupled with, we offer a 2-day free trial for Hot Desk members to drop in and use us. It goes back to that education piece. People not knowing really how co-working works and trying to get you familiar with that sort of how you work in a co-working space, coming in and working here for 2 days where you just don't have to think about there's a cost associated to it, but you just kind of get yourself comfortable. That we find that works quite well. And then circling back to the blogs and the education piece is actually I find it quite odd how people don't quite know how to the sort of social etiquette of a co-working space in some cases. So, taking Zoom calls or, in an open area on full speakers and, and thinking, so we've got people to start writing blogs to kind of explain the etiquettes around it as well, just to make sure that you have a good pair of noise cancelling headphones and all this kind of stuff that goes well with the space. So yeah, all of that I would definitely push you for opening a space in the near future.
I don't have anything meaningful to add, so Colleen nailed it.
Guys, we are just giving 2 more questions. One of them, I believe, is for Colleen, and the second one, I believe, is for Tim. So the first one comes from Alicia, and it asks, how specifically did you reach out to larger companies?
So yeah, just back on our LinkedIn strategy, that's really what our primary avenue was. That was more effective, I think, to mention calling deadlines because people aren't in. So a lot of the contacts, if you would traditional cold calls, didn't really work out because people are at home. So we found that connecting with them on LinkedIn and using some of those keyword searches and really thinking about what industry or what title help narrow that search down so that you can connect with them. And then I would also really encourage you back on the referral piece to look within your own network and friends and family. And a lot of your members probably have a spouse who's, working for a larger company. So utilize your, first order connections to try to get in and provide, whether you have a lead generator or you have some way to connect with them, utilize all those avenues to at least make contact, make them aware, and then figure out what your nurture campaign or your nurture process is going to be from that point forward.
Perfect, thank you. And the last question for today would be, I believe the team mentioned that that cold calling didn't really work, but the question here is, what have you tried that did work to attract corporate decision makers?
For corporate, one avenue also is to work together with, how do you say, real estate brokers. So they have the contacts, just make sure that you are on their good side and make the pitch to them with flexible space for their corporate clients. I think that is a good avenue. And then again, use your existing network. Probably your coworker is married to an HR person from the largest company in town, which actually is the case here with us. So I think that is, if you have a warm introduction, it's always easier. So that is what we have done. And also maybe to big companies, let me just add that I think it's very interesting for co-working for their employees. With the separate offices, I'm very happy with smaller businesses who have their actual headquarter in our space because they won't quit at a notice. So also let me add that point. A big corporation is not always safer. They are very often the first with the red pin. That's how we say it in Germany. You get the red pin out. Right? Yes, for co-working, I think that's very interesting. I also believe that HR is the right department to contact and not real estate. But that's just a theory. I might be totally wrong about that. And for the separate offices, I'm very happy to work with startups, with small, medium-sized companies. That's just awesome business.
Can I just add to that, if that's all right, just to say that actually just getting one of the employees in the space really helps because they're on virtual calls with every other employee that's in the company. So as soon as they see that they're in not their home, they get very jealous and go, "Where are you? How do I get there?" So that's a pretty good strategy. Just getting one in at least to start with.
Yeah, actually, that's a good strategy indeed. Yeah. Thanks once again to Colleen, Will, and team for jumping with us on the panel discussion and for all of the insights that you gave to us today. I believe it was very, very exciting and a useful discussion. It was a pleasure for me and Miryana to actually moderate it. Thanks to everyone that has joined the discussion and stayed with us until the end, or until they could, of course. For the others, the recording so you can rewatch it and see what the panelists were sharing today.
Yeah, thanks a lot. The topic is endless. I think more and more questions come to our mind, but we can't go on forever. But thanks for participating. For the attendees, we'll send out a short anonymous survey to collect feedback, to collect ideas for future panel discussions. If any of you want to be a panelist and has a topic that is interested in, you can write it in the survey or ping us directly. And I'm happy to see that the co-working world is moving into the right direction, and we are staying stronger and together. So thank you about that. Take care.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye. Have a great night.